you hear me, and welcome to this week's edition of Luke Shocks, where the headlines keep on coming, so I keep on coming up to knock them down. An illegal who faked her own deportation by bounty hunters to inspire a GoFundMe campaign scam now has been exposed, although people were already figuring out that this woman was a fake when they noticed that her name was Juanessi Smoletes. Wrestler Buff Bagwell willingly had his right leg amputated in response to long-term injuries from a car accident he had in 2020, preferring to simply have the leg removed because the knee surgery required to really fix the leg was too much, and well, this still makes him somebody who is less of a sad, pathetic example of pro wrestling and what happens to people long-term than CM Punk. Carmelo Anthony has pled not guilty in the upcoming trial, as his lawyers are having him practice pretending to fail to put on a black glove because it's too small. Hint hint. The CEO of Astronomer, Andy Byron, was caught with his mistress, a fellow executive at the company, at a Coldplay concert on their Jumbotron during this event they were holding at the Staples Center, making this the biggest shame that the executive has suffered since being exposed as a Coldplay fan. Outrage is spreading online over a real woman being cast as the title character in Sony's upcoming live-action Legend of Zelda movie, since the people complaining about this are unfulfilled excuses for people, and they wanted to see themselves portrayed on screen by a fellow unfulfilled excuse for a person. Shane Gillis is making waves for having hosted the ESPYs and making jokes mocking the WNBA and its blatant bias against the only reason anybody ever watches it, Little Miss Caitlin Clark, because the soy-based audience has completely been made confused by having an ESPY host that attempts to tell real jokes after so many years of the show being hosted by Seth Meyers. Colorado District Attorney E.G. Soros puppet Amy Padden, who freed a child predator, is now being recalled as Dems are defending her for supporting innocents like, well, this man right here. And South Park was entirely removed from Paramount Plus in all countries outside of the USA, with rising concerns that in the USA it will also be removed from the service as well, with people canceling Paramount Plus accounts in protest, despite the service containing shows that have actually been funny in the last 15 years. Now, with all of this, and with these games of contractual chicken, these petty battles between one billionaire douchebag versus another billionaire douchebag who are trying to see which billionaire douchebag blinks, let's just say between Skydance or Paramount, or the might as well be Colbert likes of Trey Parker and Matt Stone in this day and age, I really don't care, okay? If anything, these people really, they're the kind of people where whatever is an outcome that leads to everybody involved having the biggest example of failure and shame is the kind of thing where I am all for it. It's like when you see a real heel program in pro wrestling, where it's the kind where you really want to see both wrestlers wind up getting horribly beaten to a pulp and neither one of them wins, so you wind up getting no contest with some interference from somebody you actually want to see win a wrestling match. Basically, Trey Parker and Matt Stone are an example of something that people like to talk about when it comes to Hollywood becoming blatantly left-wing, but for some reason, I'm guessing because they're blinded by the nostalgia for those times that they mocked people on the left, which were nowhere near as numerous as the times from the root to the fruit, from the very beginning of South Park till now, that they took the side of one left-wing cause after another. It just became much more blatant after Obama's re-election. These people, really, you have to get over that. You can't be blinded by the nostalgia. You've got to stop living in the past, especially considering you're doing this all to simp for South Park, who, I'd like to remind you, in their season-long story arc of the season that happened during the 2016 election, equated you wanting to vote for Orange Man with you being a backwards, idiotic inbred that's obsessed with being stuck in the past and just wants to remember other times, and that makes you directly responsible for the fall of the Roman Empire. Because nothing says being progressive and looking towards a great brighter future than putting into the White House a woman who had been a career politician for decades and had already been there and had been amassing power and influence all over the world, whether she earned it or not, because the woman was a complete fraud. Yeah, that's truly, that critical thinking, that outside-the-box thinking, that mocking everybody attitude that South Park truly consistently always had. Then again, this is just another example of how with South Park, over the years, as I said, and as Razorfist has also gone into more detail about in recent videos and recent live streams he's done, about how the thing that truly has led to the Democratic Party getting the slap across the face, just like Hollywood's been getting the slap across the face it deserved, the synchronicity of the patterns of the Democratic Party with the patterns of Hollywood had been connected by the fact that, well, the election and the re-election of Barack Obama really emboldened the most fringe of the left to the point where you had a president who, the second he found himself in office, was then outright throwing it into the face of the American people that were not an elitist prick in Hollywood that were taking photos with him and gladly pretending that he knew what he was talking about at public events, or people in DC that were blatantly his puppet masters in the Clinton party, better known as the Democratic Party, and cheering him on and being basically his glorified press corps and cheerleading squad known as the mainstream media, as well as the likes of The Daily Show. Yeah, all that crap. And well, if you want to talk about the Comedy Central in general, it dissolving into something that was a bit sad, pathetic husk of its former self, considering Comedy Central was a show, as a network, where the show South Park made Comedy Central a household name. Well, pretty much it became a situation where the health and success and the consistency of South Park is equal to the health, consistency, and success of Comedy Central. Because before South Park, what was the biggest thing that Comedy Central had to its name besides hours of censored half-hour comedy specials and montages of stand-up comedians? Mystery Science Theater 3000, and that being a fandom that's always been more of a cult following with the type of success rate that nowhere near was able to justify huge, big ratings numbers or any kind of box office traction. And I'm not saying this as somebody who hates MST3K, I'm just saying, come on, you know it's a much smaller, tighter community of fandom than anything that South Park was able to amass at the height of its time in the limelight in the late 90s, when in just a 3-year stretch it went from being a show premiering on this fledgling basic cable service to becoming something that was being profiled in the covers of Newsweek and Rolling Stone, and becoming a pop culture mainstay that was then getting referenced and invoked on network shows and in pro wrestling at the height of its big late 90s boom period, as well as getting an Oscar-nominated Hollywood movie. Well, definitely South Park is that show that Comedy Central looks at as the house that South Park built. And well, now that South Park's had one excuse for laziness and not producing as many episodes as it used to after another, and now pretending that there was anything to do with them refusing to do any episodes or even a special to talk about the previous election as something to do with their HBO Max and Paramount contracts. No, it was them wanting to back away from getting egg on their face like cowards, like what happened when they were so cocksure and full of themselves that good old Hillary would get what they would want, and then it turns out no. And oh yeah, and part of their remedy of that was a storyline that involved Elon Musk voicing himself. So truly, South Park's had their finger on the pulse, more like ever since Obama's re-election, like everyone else in Hollywood that's been backed by corporations for their entire careers and has had nothing but being inside the Hollywood circles. The finger is not on the pulse, but far away from the pulse, jammed up their asses, and offering if you would like a chocolate-covered pretzel. Considering that more and more since that re-election of Obama, I said the most fringe of the fringe left was emboldened by that, with everything that the incrementalism of the Democratic Party that used to take decades to enforce their deranged leftist ideology then became so impatient that they were screaming it in your face and demanding it, and now all of that momentum that all their little social justice causes had been building and building since the beginning of the communist infiltration of American institutions like government or colleges or the entertainment industry from the 50s and all that, now have all completely fucking shattered, and the public support for all those DNC causes have now become about as popular as Jimmy Kimmel hosting a late night talk show have. Well, it looks like, well, South Park, you are definitely an example of, well, that same era was when South Park, pretty much like Comedy Central in general, Comedy Central went from being a, comedy network to basically being the Daily Show network, even though the Daily Show on the best of days wish it could get half the ratings of South Park, since on the best of days, the Daily Show was getting half the ratings of South Park, to the point where Mind of Mencia at its peak was doing better ratings than the Daily Show and was second only to South Park. And well, take a good long look at the sterling programming that they've produced since about 2015 or so. Like thinking that a couple of privileged as all fuck NYU grad students yapping about their vaginas on YouTube were perfect for a hugely successful sketch show that they would get to do, and or a sitcom that they would get to do called Broad City. Well, you might get about 20 jackasses with bot accounts who have liberal arts degrees in the Northeast to pretend the show was funny, and that's about it. But because you don't want egg on your face, that's one of the 5 times that Comedy Central didn't immediately cancel a show that had ratings worse than that time John McEnroe had a talk show that literally had a 0.0 rating. But hey, what do I know? I'm just somebody who actually pays attention and actually makes a note on these things. Unlike the people at Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who, like everyone else in Hollywood, have had people brown-nosing them for so damn long that they expect everybody to go and say hooray for you, instead of, whenever they're doing something stupid or arrogant, telling them, fuck you, you're all pricks. Because, well, that's what they've been for the longest time. And that's not my opinion, I know I'm right. So I want to thank you for watching. Subscribe so the channel hits 10,000 subs. Become a member today and shop in my art store with the second link below, where you can buy my art or commission me, or you can support me directly with a donation. So until then, felines, slam it, lick it, suck it, and see you, Space Cowboy.